Excuse me, you're in the wrong seat. Caroline Price's voice cut through first class as she seized the armrest of seat 1A, staring down at the calm black woman who refused to move. Passengers froze. The crew hesitated. And Caroline, fueled by entitlement, doubled down louder, sharper, crueler. To her, this was a simple correction. A nobody sitting where she didn't belong. What Caroline couldn't see, what made this moment catastrophic, was that the woman she was trying to displace wasn't just allowed in first class. She was the founder, the majority shareholder, and the CEO of the airline itself. And with every word Caroline spoke, she was dismantling her own career in real time. Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, was a special kind of organism. It throbbed with a nervous electric energy, a place where dreams were either taking off or being permanently grounded. For Aria Davenport, it was just another day at the office. Aria sat in the Quantum Airlines Sky Lounge at Terminal 4, nursing a simple black coffee. She was by any measure invisible. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant but severe bun. Her outfit was a deep navy cashmere tracksuit from a brand so exclusive it didn't bother with logos. To the untrained eye, she was just another comfortable traveler. To the trained eye, she was a ghost. This was her ritual. Once a quarter, she flew one of her own flagship routes unannounced in civilian clothes. She didn't fly private much to the chagrin of her board. You can't see the leaks from a mountaintop. She told them, you have to be in the flood. Today's flood was Quantum Flight 2, non-stop from LAX to JFK, the executive run, as the crews called it. At 42, Aria Davenport was a name whispered in boardrooms with a mixture of awe and terror. She was the woman who had done the impossible. She had built Quantum Airlines from nothing. She hadn't inherited it. She hadn't married into it. She had built it rivet by rivet, route by route, after Wall Street analysts told her the aviation market was impenetrable for new players, let alone a black woman with no dynastic connections. Forbes had put her on the cover last month under the headline, "The New Queen of the Skies." A rattling clack, clack, clack of high-quality luggage wheels on marble broke her concentration. A woman strode into the lounge radiating an aura of such profound self-importance that the air seemed to part for her. She was perhaps 10 years Aria's senior, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored linen suit, her blonde hair coiffed into a helmet of expensive maintenance. A massive Cartier watch adorned one wrist, and she was speaking loudly into a pearl-white iPhone. "No, I told Blackwell the deal is toxic." The woman snapped loud enough for half the lounge to hear. "If the fundamentals are weak, you don't restructure. You liquidate. Call the shareholders. I'll be in New York by 9:00 p.m. She gestured impatiently at the lounge attendant, flashing her first-class boarding pass as if it were a weapon. This was Caroline Price. Caroline was a consultant, which was a polite term for a corporate executioner. She was the one companies hired when they wanted to fire 3,000 people and call it synergy. Aria watched her. She had seen 100 Carolines. They were the gatekeepers, the old guard, the ones who had told her no 1,000 times. They existed on a diet of entitlement and assumptions. The boarding call for Quantum 2 began. Aria finished her coffee, slid her laptop into a worn leather satchel, and joined the first-class line. Caroline Price was directly in front of her. When the gate agent, a pleasant young man named Ben, scanned Caroline's pass, she didn't even look up from her phone. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Price," Ben said warmly. "Make sure the Wi-Fi is fast. I have a presentation to finish." Caroline commanded, not asked. Then it was Aria's turn. She smiled at Ben. "How's the turnaround looking today, Ben? Are we holding on time?" Ben, scanning her pass, looked up startled by the familiar question. "Yes, Mom. We've got a good tailwind. Should be in early. Enjoy your flight, Miss Davenport." He recognized the name, but not the face. The CEO's official photo was a powersuit glamour shot. This woman was not that. He filed it away as a coincidence. Aria walked down the jet bridge, the scent of jet fuel and recycled air filling her lungs. This was her favorite part, the threshold, the moment of commitment. She stepped onto the aircraft. Her A321T, a plane she had personally selected for this route, configured with the best lie-flat seats in the industry. She greeted the flight attendants at the door. "Good morning. Welcome aboard." They chimed. Arya turned left into the small, intimate first-class cabin. 10 seats in a 1-1 configuration. Her seat 1A was the first window seat on the left. She slid her satchel under the ottoman, sat down, and buckled her seatbelt. She closed her eyes for just a moment. A silent prayer of gratitude and a check on the engine vibrations. They felt good smooth. A moment later, Caroline Price boarded. She stopped dead in the aisle, right next to seat 1A. She looked at Arya, then at her boarding pass, then back at Arya. Arya opened her eyes. "Can I help you?" Caroline's lip curled into a thin, dismissive smile. "I believe you're in the wrong cabin, dear," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Coach boarding is from the rear." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The other first-class passengers already settling in averted their gaze, suddenly fascinated by safety cards and overhead bins. Arya Davenport kept her voice perfectly, dangerously level. "I'm quite sure I'm in the right place." Caroline Price let out an exasperated sigh, a performance for the cabin. "Look," she said, as if speaking to a child. "These seats are very expensive. I'm sure it was an honest mistake. Your seat is probably 31A, not 1A. The gate agent should have caught it." Arya simply stared at her. "My boarding pass says 1A. I am in WA." "Then the system is wrong," Caroline snapped. She flagged down Ben, the gate agent, who was just coming aboard to deliver the final manifest to the flight attendants. "Excuse me, young man." Ben hurried over his face, etched with a professional nervous smile. "Yes, Ms. Price. Is everything all right?" "No, it's not," Caroline said, pointing directly at Arya. "This person is in my seat. I am supposed to be in 1A. Ben looked confused. "Ms. Price, my system shows you assigned to 1C across the aisle." "That's impossible," Caroline hissed. "I always sit in 1A. My assistant knows that. There's been a mistake." "I can assure you," Arya said, finally unbuckling her belt and standing up. She was taller than Caroline, a fact that seemed to further annoy the other woman. "There is no mistake. This is my seat. You are in 1C. Caroline's face flushed a deep blotchy red. The mask of old money civility was slipping, revealing the raw entitlement beneath. She looked Arya up and down, her gaze lingering on the simple cashmere, the lack of jewelry, the dark skin. "How did you even get this seat?" Caroline sneered, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still loud enough for the first 2 rows to hear. "Did you use Miles A diversity voucher? Perhaps I'm a platinum medallion flyer and I couldn't even get this seat." Arya felt a cold, familiar anger rise in her chest. She had fought this her entire life. This assumption that her presence in a place of power or privilege must be an error, a handout, or a mistake. "My voucher is irrelevant." Arya said, "This is my seat. The flight attendant has confirmed it. Please take your assigned seat so we can depart." "I will not." Caroline was now verging on a tantrum. "This is unacceptable. This airline quantum or whatever it is clearly a joke. The service is appalling. I'm flying to New York for a vital meeting that will decide the fate of a major corporation, and I am being harassed by someone who clearly doesn't belong here." Ben, the flight attendant, stepped between them. He was now sweating. "Mom, Miss Price, please. We need to close the cabin door. I must ask you to take your seat. And I must ask you to do your job." Caroline shot back. "Move her. I don't care where. Move her to the back. I want this seat. I will have this seat." She turned her venom back to Arya. "You don't understand. What I am doing is important. What you are doing is taking up space. Now be a good girl and move." The entire cabin was frozen. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Maria, was now walking briskly up the aisle. "Is there a problem here?" Maria asked, her voice firm. "Yes," Caroline exclaimed. "This woman is refusing to move from a seat that isn't hers, and your staff is incompetent." Arya looked past Caroline's furious face to Ben, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. He was a good employee. She'd seen him handle the lounge rudeness with grace. He was trapped between an immovable object and an unstoppable force of arrogance. "Ben," Arya said, her voice cutting through the cabin air like a diamond. It was quiet, but it commanded every atom in the space. Ben flinched. "Yes, Mom? What is my name?" Arya asked. Your boarding pass," said Davenport. Ben stammered. "A Davenport?" Caroline laughed. A short barking sound. "Davenport? Like a sofa. How appropriate. Now move the sofa." Arya looked at Maria. "Maria, what is the name of this airline?" Maria, confused, replied, "Quantum Airlines, ma'am." "And who is the CEO of Quantum Airlines?" Maria's eyes widened. She had seen the corporate photos. The recognition dawned, followed by pure, abject terror. She looked from the cashmere-clad woman to the name on the manifest. A Davenport. Arya Davenport. "You," Maria whispered, her face losing all color. Carolyn hadn't heard. "What are you all whispering about?" "I don't have time for this. I'm going to have your entire staff fired by the time we land. I'm going to write a letter to your CEO that will have all of you back in a training seminar. This is the last time I ever fly this pathetic third-rate airline." That was the final straw. Arya locked eyes with Caroline Price. The cold anger in her chest had crystallized. It was no longer hot. It was glacial. "You're going to have my staff fired," Arya repeated. "Yes, every single one of you. You're going to write a letter to the CEO. You better believe it, and you will never fly this airline again." "Never!" Caroline shrieked. Arya smiled. It was a terrifyingly calm, sharp smile. "Good?" She paused, letting the word hang in the pressurized air. "Because I am the CEO." The silence in the cabin was no longer awkward. It was surgical. It was the absolute profound vacuum of sound that follows a sonic boom. Caroline Price's crimson, furious face didn't just go pale. It went a mottled, sickly, ghastly white, as if all the blood had been instantly siphoned from her head. Her jaw hung open. What did you say?" she stammered. Arya adjusted the sleeve of her cashmere top. She looked at Maria, then at Ben. "Please close the cabin door. We are going to be late, and it will affect our on-time performance metrics for JFK." "Yes, Miss Davenport." "Right away," Miss Davenport, Maria said, practically running to the front. Arya turned her full attention back to Caroline. The woman was frozen, her hand still gripping the top of seat 1A. "You heard me?" Arya said, her voice soft, but resonating with the unmistakable authority of a person who signs 10,000-person payrolls. "My name is Arya Davenport. I am the founder, the majority shareholder, and the chief executive officer of Quantum Airlines. This plane, it's one of 12. I signed the financing for last quarter. The seat you're trying to steal. I personally chose the leather upholstery from a supplier in Italy. The flight attendants you just threatened. They are my employees. The pathetic third-rate airline you're standing in. I built it." Caroline's hand recoiled from the seat as if it were white-hot. She was blinking rapidly, her mind clearly failing to process the reality of the situation. This was a narrative violation. The woman in the tracksuit was supposed to be the one who was out of place. "No, that's not possible," Caroline whispered. She was grasping, trying to find a version of events where she was not the villain, not the fool. You're lying." Arya almost laughed. "Maurice, I have been accused of many things in my career. Being a bad investment, being too aggressive, being difficult, but I have never been accused of lying about who I am. I don't have to." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a simple, heavy stock business card. It said only Davenport CEO, Quantum Airlines. She didn't hand it to Caroline. She held it up for her to read. Caroline's eyes darted from the card to Arya's face. The click of the L1 cabin door being sealed and armed echoed through the cabin. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. They were now locked in a metal tube, 35,000 FT in the air for the next 5 hours, and Caroline Price had just spent 10 minutes committing career suicide. "Oh my God," Caroline breathed. The bravado, the entitlement, The rage it all evaporated, replaced by a dawning visceral panic. Miss Doveport, I had no idea. It was a misunderstanding. The seat I'm terribly sorry. A misunderstanding, Arya asked, raising an eyebrow. It seemed very clear to me. You assumed based on... Well, let's be honest about what you assumed, that I didn't belong here. You called me dear. You accused me of using a diversity voucher. You threatened my staff. Which part exactly was the misunderstanding? No, I'm overt tired, Caroline stammered, wringing her hands. Her beta bag now looked less like a status symbol and more like a life raft. This trip, it's very high stakes. I'm not myself. On the contrary, Miss Price, I fear you are exactly yourself, Arya replied. That's what's so informative. Now your seat is 1C. Please take it. You've delayed this flight by 7 minutes. Caroline, utterly broken, nodded numbly. She practically scuttled across the aisle to 1C and collapsed into the seat, fumbling with the seatbelt. She didn't make eye contact with anyone. She stared straight ahead, her face still the color of old parchment. Arya sat back down in 1A. She buckled her belt, took a deep breath, and looked out the window. Ben approached her seat, his entire body trembling. Miss Davenport, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to. Arya put her hand up gently. Ben, you did fine. You followed protocol. You did not escalate. You were professional while being abused. That's all I can ask. Is there anything I can get you? He asked. Just my usual, she said. Black coffee, after we're through 10,000 sorrow effed. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Ben retreated to the galley. The plane began its taxi to the runway. Arya leaned her head against the cool window. She'd won the battle, but the confrontation had left a sour metallic taste in her mouth. It was a reminder of a fight she had to wage every single day. Across the aisle, Caroline Price was staring at her laptop, but she wasn't reading it. She was vibrating with a silent, horrified energy. Her high-stakes meeting in New York. She had a terrible sinking feeling about who exactly might be attending. The first hour of the flight was a masterclass in tension. The Boeing 777 climbed to its cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign pinged off and the cabin service began. Ben and Maria moved with a preternatural quiet, their faces masks of strained professionalism. Every clink of glass, every whisper of still or sparkling felt amplified. Arya accepted her coffee. She opened her laptop and began to work. Or at least she pretended to. Her mind was replaying the encounter. The sheer naked prejudice was bad enough. But the arrogance, the assumption that her world, her rules, her company must bend to Caroline's will. Worse, Caroline's words echoed in her head. I told Blackwell the deal is toxic. Blackwell. Arya's blood ran cold. She knew that name, Arthur Blackwell. He was on her board. Blackwell was an old money relic, a holdover from her initial seed funding round, a man who had only invested because his son had convinced him. He had been a thorn in her side for years, constantly questioning her aggressive expansion strategies, her unnecessary spending on employee benefits, and her focus on niche, which Arya knew meant non-white markets. Lately, Blackwell had been agitating. He was trying to build a coalition to challenge her leadership. He felt the company should have been sold to a legacy carrier by now, and he was furious that Aria refused to cash out. What deal was Caroline discussing with Blackwell? Across the aisle, Caroline Price was falling apart. She had ordered a glass of champagne, and then another, her hand shaking so badly she spilled some on her linen suit. She didn't seem to notice. She knew she was ruined. The business world, her world, was built on reputation and connections. She had, just in the most public and humiliating way possible, assaulted the reputation of one of the most powerful new figures in American business. A figure who was also a black woman, making Caroline's actions not just rude, but virulently racist. She had to fix this. She unbuckled her belt and moved into the aisle, crouching slightly to be level with Arya's seat. Miss Davenport, she whispered, her voice cracking. Arya didn't look up from her laptop. Yes, Miss Price. I cannot apologize enough. What I said, it was inexcusable. I was projecting. I'm under immense pressure. Arya finally turned her head, her eyes flat and analytical. Pressure, I see. The pressure to get the window seat. The pressure of being inconvenienced by someone you deemed lesser. What kind of pressure exactly turns a person into a bigot, Miss Price? No, I'm not. I'm not a bigot, Caroline insisted, a little too loudly. The passenger in 2A shifted. I've donated to, I have black friends. My company has a DEI program. Arya held up a hand. Please spare me the checklist. It only makes it worse. You are embarrassed because you were caught, not because you were wrong. There's a difference. But I truly am sorry, Caroline pleaded. Please, is there anything I can do? Let me buy you lunch. Let me make a donation to a charity of your choice, a large one. This was the part Arya hated most, the transactional apology, the belief that all sins, even those of the soul, could be cleared with a check. What you can do, Miss Price's return to your seat and allow me to work, Arya said. Your presence is distracting. Defeated, Caroline retreated. She sat in one seat, staring blankly at the bulkhead. Her career wasn't just in jeopardy, it was over, and she knew it. Every connection she had, every deal she'd ever made depended on her reputation as a sharp, ruthless professional operator. Now she was a racist buffoon. The story was too good. It would be all over Wall Street by morning. Did you hear what Caroline Price did on a quantum flight? Arya watched her for a moment. This wasn't victory. It was just pathetic. But the name Blackwell still hung in the air. Arya's mind began to churn. Blackwell was making a move. He was talking to a consultant who specialized in liquidations and hostile restructurings. A consultant named Caroline Price. Arya's hands stilled on her keyboard. It's her. It couldn't be. The odds were astronomical that the very woman Blackwell had hired to undermine her, to find a way to oust her, was this woman. The woman who had just publicly humiliated herself and proven her own deep-seated biases. Arya needed to be sure. She opened her email and toggled the connect to Wi-Fi switch. The quantum satellite Wi-Fi connected with a soft ping. Arya had personally overseen the deal with the provider demanding bandwidth capable of streaming, not just emailing. Now she was about to find out if it was worth the money. Her inbox flooded the usual daily performance metrics, fuel cost analysis, marketing reports, and then at the top one marked urgent from her COO, David Chen. Subject urgent, Blackwell's play. Arya's heart rate kicked up. She clicked it open. Arya, it's happening. Blackwell has officially called an emergency board meeting for 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, just after you land. He's invoking the corporate viability clause in the bylaws. He's bringing in an outside consultant to present a case for a strategic restructuring. He's claiming your leadership is emotionally driven and fiscally irresponsible, his words, and that you're leaving the company vulnerable. The play is clear. He's going to try to paint you as incompetent, force a vote of no confidence, and get the board to install a turnaround specialist as interim CEO while they negotiate a sale. The specialist's name is Caroline Price. Price Consulting Group. She's notorious. I've attached her dossier. Call me the second you get this. David Arya's breath hitched. Her eyes darted across the aisle. Caroline Price was sitting there nursing a third glass of champagne, her face a mask of misery, completely oblivious. Arya clicked the attachment. Price dossier PDF. It opened, and there on the first page was a crisp professional headshot of the woman in 1C. Blonde helmet hair, thin smile, cold eyes. The same Cartier watch, Caroline Price, Principal, Price Consulting Group. Underneath was a summary specializes in pre-acquisition optimization, asset liquidation, and strategic downsizing. A corporate executioner. Arya looked up from her screen, a slow, cold realization dawning. This wasn't a random encounter. This wasn't just a rude passenger. This was the assassin sent by her enemy, walking onto her flagship, sitting in her cabin, and handing her the murder weapon. The sheer cosmic irony of it was staggering. Caroline was flying to New York to present a case for why Arya was an emotionally driven and incompetent leader after having just staged an epic emotionally driven and utterly incompetent meltdown based on pure, unadulterated racism. Arya had to physically restrain herself from laughing out loud. Blackwell had hired a specialist. All right, a specialist in self-destruction. Arya's mind, which had been foggy with anger and exhaustion, was now razor-sharp. The game had changed. This was no longer about a personal insult. This was about the survival of her company. She immediately began typing a reply to David. "David, you are not going to believe this. I am on flight 2. Guess who is sitting in 1C? Do not call me. I'm handling this. Get me everything you can find on Price Consulting's last 3 restructurings. I want failure rates, employee lawsuits, and any articles on her professional conduct. I suspect her strategies are as biased as her personality. Also get me the file on Ben Tilsdale, the gate agent, and Maria Sanchez, the lead flight attendant on this flight. I want their full service records. They are now material witnesses. Tell the board I will be there and I will be bringing a guest. Arya." She hit send. The email disappeared into the ether. Arya closed her laptop. She looked across the aisle at Caroline Price, who was now weeping silently into a linen napkin. Arya's anger was gone. It was replaced by a cold, precise, and utterly ruthless focus. Caroline Price thought her day was already over. She thought she had hit rock bottom. Arya knew the truth. Caroline hadn't even begun to fall. The rest of the flight was a countdown. Arya spent the next 3 hours in a state of intense, focused preparation. Her laptop screen was a flurry of spreadsheets, reports, and background checks provided by David's team, who were scrambling on the ground. The data was damning. Caroline Price's restructurings were a pattern of corporate arson. She'd go in, recommend firing all non-essential staff, which in her view always included DEI departments, R&D, and customer service sell off assets and take a massive bonus, leaving the hollowed-out company to declare bankruptcy 2 years later. Twice she'd been named in class action lawsuits alleging discriminatory firing practices. Both were settled out of court. She didn't fix companies. She disassembled them for parts. And her strategies disproportionately affected minority employees and low-income customer bases. Arya now had the what. The plane incident had given her the why. Caroline's entire business model was a macro version of what had happened in 1A. She saw value only in things that looked like her. Everyone else was a diversity voucher, an inefficiency to be cut. As the plane began its initial descent into the crowded New York airspace, the change in engine pitch roused Caroline from her champagne-induced stupor. She looked pale, sick, and terrified. She knew she was flying toward her own execution. She just didn't know Arya was now the one holding the axe. The fastened seatbelt sign chimed. Caroline unbuckled and for a final desperate time lunged into the aisle. "Miss Davenport," she pleaded, her voice from crying. "Arya, please. I'll do anything. I'll resign. I'll retire. Just please don't let this be the end of me. Don't tell anyone." Arya looked at her, not with hatred, but with a kind of profound pity. It was the pity one feels for a predator caught in its own trap. "Tell anyone, Ms. Price. I don't think you understand the situation," Arya said calmly. "What situation?" Caroline whispered. "I insulted you. I was horrible. I get it. I'll pay. I'll do anything." "It's not about me," Arya said. "It's about your 900 a.m. meeting tomorrow." Caroline's face, which Arya had not thought could get any whiter, achieved a new supernatural shade of pale. She gripped the armrest of Arya's seat to steady herself. You know about that, I know. Arya said that you were retained by Arthur Blackwell to present a case for my removal based on my emotional and incompetent leadership. I know that your plan is to recommend a strategic restructuring that will in all likelihood involve liquidating assets and firing thousands of my employees. Caroline was no longer breathing. She was just staring her eyes wide with a horror that was almost primal. "How you told me, Miss Price," Arya said. "When you got on the plane, you were on the phone with Mr. Blackwell and the rest. Well, I am the CEO. I tend to know what's happening in my own company. Arya leaned in. You see, your crime wasn't just being a racist. Your crime was a catastrophic lack of professionalism. You, a turnaround specialist, couldn't even manage a simple flight without exposing your own profound toxic biases. The very biases I'm now certain that inform your entire business strategy. Please, Caroline begged, tears streaming down her face. I won't do the presentation. I'll call Blackwell. I'll say, I'm sick. I'll disappear. Please. Oh no. Arya said, her voice turning to steel. You are absolutely going to do that presentation. You are going to walk into that boardroom and you are going to give the speech of your life. You are going to tell my board, in your own words, exactly how you plan to fix my airline. Why? Caroline choked out. Arya smiled, but it was the baring of teeth. Because I want them to hear it. I want them to hear it all. And then I'm going to tell them my story. See you at 9:00 a.m., Miss Price. Now please, for the final time, sit down. You're a flight risk. The wheels of the A321T touched down on the tarmac at JFK. The landing was buttery smooth. A perfect landing for a perfect corporate execution. The Quantum Airlines boardroom on Park Avenue was a testament to Arya's vision. It was not a dark mahogany-paneled crypt like most old guard corporate HQs. It was a glass box in the sky with panoramic views of Manhattan. The table was a single massive slab of white marble. Arya sat at its head. She was no longer the invisible woman from the lounge. She wore a striking crimson powers suit, her hair down, her makeup flawless. She was the queen in her throne room. The board members filed in a mix of allies like David Chen and skeptics. And then there was Arthur Blackwell. Smug, impeccably dressed in a Savile Rose suit, radiating the confidence of a man who believes he's already won. Arya, good of you to make it, he said, his tone oily. Difficult flight illuminating Arthur. Arya replied, her voice pleasant. I trust your preparations are in order. Indeed, Blackwell gestured to the door. This is Miss Caroline Price. I've retained her to present an outside analysis of our current inefficiencies. Caroline Price walked in. She looked like a ghost. Her suit was rumpled. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She clutched her laptop as if it were a shield. When she saw Arya at the head of the table, she flinched as if she'd been physically struck. Miss Price? Welcome, Arya said, her voice booming with confidence. We've met, please, the floor is yours. Blackwell shot Caroline a look. Pull it together. For the next 45 minutes, Caroline stumbled through the presentation she had prepared. It was exactly what Arya expected, a brutal, soulless plan. And so, by sunsetting the lower yield routes to Detroit, Atlanta, and Newark, Caroline read, her voice monotone. And reallocating those assets to expanded service in Zurich and Dubai, we can re-enter the brand on its core luxury demographic, she continued. Furthermore, by automating 40% of customer service and reservations and outsourcing our ramp agents, we can achieve a 22% reduction in labor costs in the first 6 months. She was in essence telling Arya to fire her blackest, most diverse workforce and abandon her blackest, most loyal customer bases. When she finally finished, the room was tense. Blackwell was beaming. Thank you, Miss Price, Blackwell said. A bold, necessary strategy. You see, Arya, this is the kind of decisive, unsentimental leadership accompany of this. Mr. Blackwell. Arya interrupted, holding up her hand. I have a question for Miss Price. Caroline, who had been sinking into her chair, froze. Ms. Price, Arya began. Your presentation is built on an algorithm of value. You identify low-yield and inefficient elements and you cut them. A very unsentimental strategy, as Mr. Blackwell says. Yes, Caroline whispered. It's just business. I'm curious, Arya said, leaning forward. How you identify those inefficiencies in the wild. For example, if you were to see, say, a black woman in a cashmere tracksuit sitting in first-class seat 1A, would you identify her as a low-yield passenger? An inefficiency in the luxury experience? Blackwell's smile vanished. Arya. What is this? Caroline's face crumpled. She knew what was happening. Ms. Price, Arya commanded. Why don't you tell the board what you said to me on Flight 2 yesterday when you tried to have me physically removed from my own seat? Caroline was mute. You can't remember, Aria pressed. Let me help. You asked me if I had a diversity voucher. You told me I didn't belong. You threatened to have the flight crew Mr. Ben Tilsdale and Ms. Maria Sanchez fired. You called this airline pathetic and third-rate. You did all of this loudly and publicly because you, the specialist in identifying value, looked at me and saw nothing. The boardroom was in stunned silence. David Chen was hiding a smile. Blackwell was sputtering. This is an anecdote. It's unprofessional. Unprofessional. Aria shot back, standing up. She is the walking, talking embodiment of the unprofessional. Her entire presentation is this anecdote just written in spreadsheets. She wants to cut routes to Atlanta and Detroit. The same bias. She wants to fire our service staff. The same arrogance. This isn't a business strategy, Arthur. This is her personal prejudice laundered into a corporate proposal. Aria slammed her hand on the table. This woman, your chosen specialist, is a liability. Her strategies are not just morally bankrupt. They are financially toxic. The lawsuits her analysis would bring. The brand damage from abandoning our most loyal markets. She wouldn't just be cutting costs. She would be cutting the soul of this company. She turned to Caroline. Miss Price, your contract is terminated. Your invoice will not be paid. Security will show you out. I suggest you find another airline for your flight home. Caroline didn't even fight. She gathered her laptop and in a walk of pure, unadulterated shame, was escorted from the boardroom. Aria turned back to the table. Her eyes landed on Arthur Blackwell. He was as pale as Caroline had been. Arthur, Aria said, her voice now dangerously quiet. You brought this person into my house. You tried to use her to gut my company. You invoked an emergency clause to question my leadership. She walked around the table until she was standing right behind him. This board will now hold a new vote, she declared. Not on my competence, but on yours. I am calling for the immediate removal of Arthur Blackwell from the board of directors of Quantum Airlines on the grounds that his judgment is fundamentally and catastrophically impaired. All in favor, every hand except Blackwell's went up. Even his allies had seen the writing on the wall. The karma was complete, hard, fast, and absolute. Aria returned to her seat. Thank you. Now, let's talk about our new expansion into the Caribbean. David, the numbers. The meeting continued. Quantum Airlines was hers. Securely, finally. 2 weeks later, Ben Tilsdale was promoted to head of in-flight customer service training for the entire JFK hub. His first training module was built around a case study, The Incident in 1A, a masterclass on grace under pressure and de-escalating entitlement. Caroline Price's consulting firm dissolved, and Quantum Flight 2 LAX to JFK remained the most profitable route in the sky, with Aria Davenport still occasionally flying in 1A just to check on her team. The elevator doors closed on Caroline Price, and the ding of its departure was the sound of a guillotine. The boardroom, which had been vibrating with tension, suddenly exhaled. Arthur Blackwell sat frozen, his hands flat on the marble table. He was a man who had just seen his own ghost. Arthur. Aria said, her voice no longer fiery, but cool and clinical. Security will be at your office in 10 minutes to collect your company property. Your access has already been revoked. I believe you know the way out. Blackwell, a man who had commanded rooms like this for 40 years, looked around. The other board members, his colleagues, wouldn't meet his eye. They were already studying the reports for the Caribbean expansion, distancing themselves from his political corpse. He was no longer a colleague. He was a contamination. He rose, his Savallero suit suddenly looking too large for him, and walked out of the room without another word. Aria sat down. David, she said to her COO, get PR on the line. I want a statement out in 30 minutes. What's the angle? David asked, his pen ready. Simple. Quantum Airlines reaffirms commitment to market growth. Removes Arthur Blackwell from board. We spin it as a unanimous decision to shed legacy thinking that was holding back innovation. We don't mention Price. She's irrelevant. And the incident, David asked carefully. The incident, Aria said, is now an internal training module. Ben Tilsdale and Maria Sanchez are receiving a 10% discretionary bonus for exemplary professionalism in the face of a hostile passenger encounter. Their story will be the new gold standard for our quantum care program. She was in one move rewarding her people, solidifying her company culture, and erasing her enemies. It wasn't just a victory. It was a restructuring of her own. Downstairs, Caroline Price stumbled out onto Park Avenue. The city noise hit her like a physical blow. She felt naked, exposed. Her phone, which had been her scepter, now felt like a lead weight. She fumbled with it, her hand still shaking. She had to call her office, had to call her lawyer, had to. She pulled up her email. There was already a message from her lawyer timestamped 10 minutes ago. Subject urgent. Cease and desist. Quantum Airlines. It was a preemptive strike from Aria's legal team. It stated that any attempt by Caroline Price or Price Consulting Group to use, share, or discuss any proprietary information from her brief consultancy would be met with the full force of the law, seeking damages in the 8-figure range. It also strongly advised her to refrain from any public comment regarding Quantum, its CEO, or its board. She was gagged. She tried to log into her firm's server. Access denied. A new wave of panic, cold and acidic, rose in her throat. She called her office manager. "Linda, it's Caroline. I can't get into the server." Linda's voice was flat. "I'm sorry, Carolyn. Who is this?" "It's Caroline, your boss. What's wrong with you?" "My apologies," Linda said, her voice now robotic. "I've just received a notification from our server host. Our primary accounts are frozen due to non-payment. A chargeback from our largest client's retainer, Aria. She hadn't just terminated the contract. She had clawed back the initial payment. That's a mistake." Caroline shrieked, flagging uselessly for a cab. "I'll sort it out." "I'm not sure you will," Linda said, and the ice in her voice was colder than the New York wind. "I'm also looking at a Wall Street Journal alert. It says Arthur Blackwell has been removed from the Quantum Board. And oh God, Forbes is running a follow-up. The Price of Arrogance. How a turnaround specialist crashed and burned. Caroline, it's about you. They're mentioning the settled lawsuits, the discriminatory firing patterns." Caroline's phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the pavement. The news was out. Aria hadn't needed to leak the racist part. The business world was doing it for her. She was no longer Caroline Price, corporate executioner. She was a byword for failure, a specialist who had destroyed her own career. Across town, Arthur Blackwell was in the oak-paneled bar of the Metropolitan Club, a place where he had made and broken men for decades. He ordered an 18-year Macallan. "Neat. Put it on my tab, Robert," he said to the bartender. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell." The bartender, who had served him for 20 years, said quietly, "The manager has asked to settle all outstanding accounts. Your membership is under review." Blackwell's head snapped up. "What, I've been a member here for 30 years. The Ethics Committee, sir." They read the journal. The Ethics Committee, a group of men who had happily done insider trading for years, but they had one rule: don't get caught and don't be this embarrassing. His phone buzzed. It was the CEO of a different board. He sat on a bank. Arthur, the voice said, "No pleasantries. I saw the news. A failed proxy fight against Davenport. What were you thinking?" "It was a sound financial move, Charles." Arthur blustered, trying to find his old world footing. "Was it because it looks like you tried to oust one of the most celebrated CEOs in the country and got your head handed to you?" "It looks like you bet against the future, Arthur. It makes you look old. It makes you look weak. The board feels your judgment is compromised. We're going to have to ask for your resignation." Click. Before he could even process the blow, another call. His son. "Dad, what did you do?" "My seed fund. Quantum was our flagship investment. You were the family representative. I just got a call from Aria Davenport's office. She's exercising the morality clause in the original funding agreement. She's buying out our stake at its original value. Blackwell did the math. He had just lost his family over $200 million more in future value. He had not just been fired, he had been liquidated. He looked at the news ticker on the bar's TV. There was Aria smiling, her face radiating power and intelligence. The Chiron read, "Quantum leap. Davenport solidifies control. Shares soar. 12% on new strategy." His strategy, his name, his reputation. All of it gone. Destroyed by a young black woman in a cashmere sweatsuit whom he had dismissed as emotional and incompetent. The irony was so bitter, it choked him. Back in her office, Aria was on a video call, but it wasn't with a banker or a board member. It was with Ben Tilsdale. "Ben," she said, a warm smile on her face. "I'm looking at your service record. 8 hours, not a single customer complaint, and 12 commendations for efficiency." Ben, sitting in a break room at JFK, was blushing. I just try to do my job, Miss Davenport." "You do more than that, Ben. You're the face of this company. You're the first person our passengers see. And yesterday, you were the face of Grace. Maria's as well, which is why I'm so excited about your promotion. The Quantum Care program is going to be your baby. I want you to teach every new hire how to handle her." "Caroline, I'd be honored," Mom Ben said, his voice thick with emotion. "Good. And one more thing. I've been reviewing Ms. Price's recommendations. She suggested we cut the Atlanta, Detroit, and Newark routes." Ben's face fell. Those are our family routes, Mom. People fly those to see their grandparents, their kids." "I know," Aria said. "So we're not cutting them. We're doubling down. As of today, we are adding 3 more daily flights to each of those hubs, and we're launching a family first fare bundle. Your team gets to announce it." This, Aria knew, was the real victory. It wasn't just about punishing the wicked. It was about proving that her emotional and inclusive way of doing business was not just good morals. It was great business. Caroline's model was to cut. Aria's was to build. She ended the call and looked out her window at the city. She had built this, not just the airline, but this new reality. That evening, Caroline Price was at JFK, not in the Sky Lounge, which she was now permanently banned from. She was in the chaos of the main terminal for Regal Air. Her credit cards had been declined. She had paid for a one-way ticket to Los Angeles in coach with her debit card, wiping out most of her liquid cash. She was sitting at Gate 24, a broken woman. Her blonde hair was flat, her linen suit stained with champagne and now airport coffee. People bumped her luggage. A child screamed. She was just another face in the crowd. She boarded the plane. She was in seat 38E, a middle seat. She squeezed in between a large man who was already snoring and a young woman who was tapping furiously on her phone. As the plane took off, Caroline stared at the seat back in front of her. A long 5-hour flight in misery. The young woman next to her angled her phone, and Caroline couldn't help but see the screen. She was reading an article from a popular tech blog. The headline was, "I built this airline. How Ara Davenport took on the old guard and won." The article was a detailed blow-by-blow of the boardroom victory. It mentioned an unnamed, disastrous consultant whose prejudiced data-thin report had been the final nail in Arthur Blackwell's coffin. An unnamed consultant. She had spent a lifetime building her name. It had been her weapon and her shield. In less than 24 hours, Aria Davenport had taken it from her. She was a ghost. The flight attendant, a young, tired-looking man, pushed the cart down the aisle. "Mom," he said to Caroline, who was staring blankly. "Mom, your bag, it's in the aisle. You need to put it under the seat in front of you." Caroline looked down at her Beiger Veneta handbag, the bag she had carried into the lounge like a crown. Numbly, she bent down, picked it up, and shoved it under the seat into the darkness with the crumbs and the dust. The world is full of people who will judge you by your cover, who will assume your place in the world, and who will try to take what isn't theirs. But as this story shows, karma has a way of balancing the books. The higher the entitlement, the harder the fall. What Caroline Price learned on that flight wasn't just that she'd picked on the wrong person. It was that her entire worldview was bankrupt. Aria Davenport didn't just build an airline. She built a new standard proving that success and decency aren't mutually exclusive. What did you think of Caroline's karma? Was it deserved? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. If you want more real-life stories of drama twists and justice, be sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for new stories every week. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.